Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here today. Thanks for coming to April's edition of ctcLink Accessibility Open Forum. My name is Monica Olson, and I'm the Accessibility Policy Associate at the State Board. I've been here for about 10 months now, and I help co-host these monthly meetings. My colleagues from the State Board are also here, and I'll turn it over to them here in just a second to introduce themselves after I do a few housekeeping announcements. Number one, we are recording this meeting, and each recording is captioned and then posted online for a playback or further review on our CTC accessibility webpage. Number two, we do have a professional live captioner here with us today. So if you would like to use live captioning and follow along that way, please go ahead and click the live transcript CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see that, you might look for the 3-dot ellipses and click that instead, and it'll give you an option to view live transcript. We do invite participants to unmute themselves and ask questions throughout our presentation. Our meeting is 1 hour long. We do have a lot of content to get through today. If you are unable to or do not want to unmute yourselves, please feel free to put a question in the chat. We all do our very best to moderate the chat and follow along and make sure everyone gets their questions answered or comments heard. Sometimes we miss something, so poke us again. That's okay. We don't take offense to that. So without further ado, thanks again for being here, and I'll hand it over to Sandy.
Good morning, everybody. This is Sandy Mean, Director of Application Services at the State Board. I'm going to let everybody introduce as we kind of go through the agenda. So we're going to start off today, talk a little bit about our service desk that we use at the State Board for reporting issues with ctcLink. And we'll go a little bit into that. Monica and I are going to talk a little bit about what the difference is when we talk about terms like testing and reporting issues. Christopher Soren's team is going to talk about a little bit of how we do accessibility reviews at the State Board around ctcLink. Go into a little bit about the monthly focus group that's offered by Oracle for HCM. It's the national, I believe, is the audience. If not, sure if it's worldwide, but I know at least national. And then his team will go through, give an update on service desk tickets or Oracle service requests that have changed since the last time we met. That is going to be a little different the way we present that, and I'll let him explain when we get a little farther into the presentation. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I want to introduce Jonathan Ryder. If you want to go ahead and we'll do it. We had questions before about the service desk ticketing system, so I wanted him to offer kind of some feedback for you guys or some updates to you guys, and then answer any questions. Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. So hello, my name is Jonathan Ryder. I'm the Infrastructure Services Director at the State Board. So I oversee, I guess for the sake of this meeting, the system administrators who install and manage the service desk for ctcLink. There's been complaints, as you guys are aware, of accessibility with the service desk, and trying to handle some of these, we've came up with a method to allow authorized ticket submitters. I'm trying to think of the right word to use. So somebody at a college who is authorized to enter in tickets on behalf of somebody else, to actually use emails if they need to get around the accessibility issues. Trying to think of really how to word this thing correctly, but essentially what we've done is we've created 4 email addresses that are able to be used depending on the pillar that the issue is in, that an individual who is authorized to submit tickets can email to. And Monica, do we have these actually in the slide deck? I didn't know if those got updated or.
Hey, Jonathan, this is Monica. Thanks again for being here. Those 4 email addresses that you're referencing are not in the slide deck because we had posted the slide deck before our most recent email exchange. However, I did update the accessibility ticket guide document that I'll be sharing in just a moment to include those 4 email addresses. So if you'd like, I could post a link to that guide right now so people could open it up and navigate through it so they can see the email addresses. Would that be helpful to you?
I think it's okay. We can talk about it, and if there's questions, we can answer there. The email address is just trying to come up with something simple or easy to remember. We came up with they start with TA for ticket accessibility and then the pillar. So for instance, it would be TACS for Campus Solutions or TAHCM for Human Capital Management or FS for Finance. And then we have one for Tech, so TA Tech. And all of those email addresses are at sbctc.edu. And essentially what this does is anybody who is able to submit a ticket on behalf of other people could send an email if they have an accessibility issue with using the ticket system, and that will auto-generate a ticket for that pillar. And that way it kind of spreads the load. It's not one person here at the state board who's monitoring a queue and having to transfer tickets around. If you know it's a Campus Solutions issue, you can send an email to tacs@sbctc.edu and it will auto-generate a ticket to the Campus Solutions pillar. Same thing for Finance, HCM, or like a Tech. So if it's an actual accessibility issue for ctcLink, for instance, you could submit a ticket to TA Tech at sbctc.edu. And this is really kind of a Band-Aid solution until we're able to switch off onto a new service desk software. In talking with some of the people, I know Clark was on the same ticket system. I think Highline is on the same ticket system, and dealing with some of the accessibility issues with SolarWinds Web Help Desk. Clark actually moved on to a new ticket system, which I'll be reaching out to them when the time comes for us to start looking at what ticket system. But essentially, as soon as all the colleges are live, we're going to be starting up a project to be looking at transitioning onto a different ticket system, which may take 6 months or more, depending on the ticket system we switch to, because we have a lot of customizations in this current system to get us to where we are. But that's kind of the quick update, at least with emails. The future of the service desk software, we'll be looking at addressing that probably around June.
Maybe your camera froze.
The other software. Yeah. So any questions in general around the emails or auto-generating tickets, or even maybe the future of the service desk software itself? Okay, I think that's all I have, Monica.
Okay, thanks again, Jonathan. So before I move on to the piece that I want to present, and I'll put a link in the chat to a document that participants can open and view on their own computers if they want to. I'll just quickly summarize again what Jonathan is helping to explain today so people can hear it twice. So we acknowledge that there are accessibility concerns for our current ticketing platform. And right now, the intermediate solution that we have come up with to offer people who are authorized ticket submitters at their college campus is to use email as an alternate option to submit ticketing information. And there are 4 email addresses created, one for each pillar that exists inside ctcLink, and then one that is TA for Ticket Accessibility Tech, TECH, at sbct.edu. And that one specifically for those who have accessibility barriers or concerns that they want to submit to our team for review. We also acknowledge that people might have non-accessibility questions or issues around ctcLink in whatever pillar they're working within, and therefore those other email options exist as well for you to use. The email addresses are in the guide that I'm about to talk about and share. And as Jonathan said before, you know, in the future after go live, the agency will be investigating different ticketing platform solutions and ensure that accessibility is part of the formal review in choosing the new option. So now you've heard that information twice. Is there any questions for Jonathan or myself before we move on? All right, so we're going to move on. Again, if you have other questions or comments, you can use the chat feature as well. Since our last meeting in March, I worked to create a brief guide titled How to Submit an Accessibility Ticket. And let me go ahead and pause my speaking here for a minute. I'm going to copy paste the link to this document in the chat so everyone can pull it up if they want to and follow along as I explain what it is, why I created it, and how to use it. So just one moment here. I'm working on one small laptop screen, so I have to change my view. Okay, coming back into Zoom. Going back to full screen. Okay, I'm now putting a link in the chat. That should take you to a viewable Google Doc titled How to Submit an Accessibility Ticket. And I'll continue on with my presentation. So at last month's meeting, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times before in the open forums and certainly in conversations here and there with Cato or between myself and individuals, that there might be some confusion on what information is required or helpful to the agency when submitting accessibility concerns around ctcLink for the app services team here to investigate, replicate the issue, and document it with Oracle. When I was in a conversation with a colleague at Bellevue, it was a very enlightening conversation, and she helped explain to me that for those of you who are brand new to ctcLink, so who are kind of just going through their deployment experiences, it can sometimes be hard to know, wait, is this a true accessibility barrier that I'm experiencing with my assistive technology? Or is it just something I don't quite know how to do inside ctcLink yet, because sometimes the steps to complete tasks are can be a little confusing, or maybe we're not looking at the most accurate instructions. So kind of piecing that apart of, is this an actual accessibility barrier or something else, can be a little bit hard for the user. And I think part of our role at the state board when those tickets come in is to work with the user who submitted that ticket to help identify what the actual problem is and how best to communicate that to Oracle depending on what's going on. So in the document, it takes you through steps on how to actually submit a ticket, by logging in and using SolarWinds, if that's an option for you. And it also lists the different email alternative options that Jonathan Ryder spoke about a moment ago and has created. Most importantly, I think this document helps break down into a list of items of the type of information or content that we at the state board really need, that benefits us when there's an accessibility concern for an end user. This information, such as what assistive technology are you using, what pillar are you inside, what ctcLink page are you on, what task are you attempting to complete, what browser are you using. All of that information helps us test and replicate the issue, and then take that information to Oracle for discussion and request for fixes if there's an internal fix that the team can produce themselves. And so the goal for me for this document was not to overcomplicate things, but just to simply state what is the information that we need if you can provide it to us. And obviously, if you can't provide all of that information for some reason or another, we're still going to accept and review that information you provide. It might mean that the team needs to have a little bit more back and forth conversation with you to understand what exactly your experience is and what the problem is. And it also might mean that there might be it might be a little bit harder to replicate and prove the problem to Oracle. Before we move on to, I will say that the next topic we're going to discuss is Sandy and I are going to talk about the difference between the proactive and regular accessibility testing that State Board staff are doing versus the ticketing system, because we do feel like there's been some confusion and smushing of the two. So we're going to move into that next. I think it's very important for us to clarify the work we're doing outside and in addition to reviewing tickets. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions or comments about the how to submit accessibility ticket guide? Or Chris, Sandy, do you have additional comments to share?
This is Christopher Soren. That was all good. Yeah, we just want to be able to replicate it, to show Oracle what they need to fix. So we appreciate all the details.
Thanks, Chris. This is Monica. So are there any guests out there today who have any questions or comments about this information before we move on? Well, that's okay. I hope this information is helpful to you all, and feel free to share this information with your colleagues. It is not secret sauce. We're trying to always increase and be better with our transparency around what we're doing, how we're doing the work we're doing, and what information we need from you, our colleagues and users to do the best we can. My hope is, and hopefully Sandy can give a little nod of affirmation here, is my hope is that in the near future, we can put this information available publicly on our webpage so that people don't have to rely on a Google Doc. But for now, that's what we have. And it's not secret sauce, so you're free to share this information. Okie dokie. So now we're moving on to a conversation that Sandy and I are going to lead together, discussing a little bit the difference between accessibility testing versus ticketing or reporting issues. And Sandy, I need to get some water. I'm got a little bit of a rough voice this morning. So do you mind if I hand it over to you for a moment?
No problem. Again, this is Sandy Main, State Board. The one thing I kind of was sensing over the last few forums and other conversations is that I feel that maybe the State Board did a disservice in explaining what we mean by when we ask for feedback from the colleges or from different users and things on accessibility issues. And I personally just wanted to send out there, it says that, and it's almost the last bullet in the bottom corner. It's really, we're not asking for users to go out and review all of the functions and everything within ctcLink to find accessibility issues. I mean, there's processes that Christopher's team does, and he'll explain that shortly. But really what we really want to encourage people is to report issues when you are being told about them or you are experiencing them. That is just one of the feedback mechanisms that we use. So we do our own internal evaluation and stuff like that, but we really rely on the feedback and experiences from the colleges. This is no different than anything else happening within ctcLink. So we do have that expectation of our users when they experience an error message, or if they experience odd behavior when they're just doing their normal day-to-day, such as I'm trying to enter, a leave and I'm getting this kind of response or it's not letting me do it. So it's just to me, it's just the responsibility of those users. If you experience something, please report it. We can't fix what we don't always know about. And there is almost impossible, how large ctcLink is. We can't individually touch every piece. So we kind of have to look at the whole group on it. So Monica, jump in anytime, but Christopher's team will go through and we're going to talk about kind of the proactive approaches we take to testing the entire ctcLink at the different phases that we go through on updates. Also kind of a reactive, what happens when we do hear about issues on that. Testing also comes in the form of us, maybe, or we have a fix, or Oracle has introduced a fix to us. We've applied it into the environment. There are situations where it's really easy for us to say, yeah, checkbox, we've accomplished, or it's addressed the issue. But there are certain situations where we really need somebody else to give that kind of validation. So is this really addressing it to the full extent? We can say according to the laws or the regulations, yes, it's right, but is it really serving that underlying purpose, or addressing the issue? So sometimes we do go out and request that end users help us with the testing. So that's kind of within the framework on there. Of course, on the reporting, we do it for everything. Please report if you find stuff, and talks about how we do it, and refer to Monica's guide. I always like that, Monica's guide. That's what I'm going to dub it on the webpage. Monica's guide. I love it. That's your legacy now. We'll put a link out there, but that's all about the reporting and the ticketing system, and let us know. That's the greatest feedback. In fact, I get a little bit of great pleasure, and I hope Oracle's not listening, when we can go out and Christopher's team goes at them and fix this, and we have that, and it's real life issues that we can come to them, and I get excited when I hear about all the work that his team's doing with Oracle, and trying to get them to address our needs, everybody's needs. So Monica, did you want to add anything?
Thanks, Sandy. I'm back and have a couple minutes of a speaking voice. So I think you did justice in explaining the content that we're trying to clarify. So I think the main message for our listeners today is that, in addition to inviting our colleagues and users of ctcLink to submit tickets when they are encountering a problem in ctcLink, and that's not just accessibility barriers, it could be any type of user experience issue that may have nothing to do with accessibility, that Chris's team, the App Services team, is working hard to do as much proactive testing and evaluation as possible, on top of reviewing tickets, replicating those problems, and communicating with Oracle. As Sandy said, Chris is going to take the mic here in a minute and explain in more detail what those processes look like. He's going to talk a little bit about the difference between conformance accessibility testing and functional accessibility testing, and where the team's priorities are right now. So please pay attention to that. We think it's very important for you to understand those basic concepts. The slide that you're looking at right now also says on the left-hand column under testing that slide 15 provides more information about the proactive testing methods. So if you want to go read on your own after today's presentation, you're welcome to do so. And then on the other column on the right-hand side of the screen, slides 16 and 17 provides more information about the reporting and ticketing process. And I see that Megan asked a question in the chat, so I'll read it out loud. Her question is, how would a student report an accessibility issue? That's a great question because we also have the reality of authorized ticket submitters versus someone who's not an authorized ticket submitter. So I'm hoping that maybe Jonathan and Sandy and Chris can speak to this question together.
So this is Sandy. Just like all other issues reported by students, the first line of reporting or identifying is to work with their local service desk or help desk, however they're classified on the campus. That is the process. And then on your campus, I assume you would have your own mechanism for people to report or students to report. So whatever various departments on campus. But the first level of reporting is always going to be at the college level. And those issues that are not able to be resolved locally are then escalated into the ticketing system, and that's by the authorized ticket users on the campus. So it's working, every campus has their own setup on how they do that. So Jonathan, if you have more to offer, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm not sure if you have more, we could add some clarification on that.
No, I think you kind of you hit the nail on the head there, Sandy. So the issue, and I'll just kind of regurgitate what Sandy said. The issue we have is we don't really allow people to submit tickets in the ticket system unless they're an authorized approver at the campuses. So a lot of the work that we did, even creating email addresses and things like that, was all based on authorized ticket submitters at a college. So with any issue, just like Sandy said, they should be working with the local college, and there's people at the colleges who are allowed to open up tickets who have been approved by the project manager or the SME subject matter experts or even security to open up tickets on behalf of people. So those are the people that the state board typically works with.
Thanks, Jonathan. This is Monica. I'll reiterate that every college does have an assigned ctcLink project manager, and that person either is an authorized ticket submitter or will know who those staff are at an individual college. I recognize that this creates some extra work or steps to get the information from the student, and that, because the student can't submit the ticket directly themselves. And I'm wondering if that's part of your concerns, Megan, although I don't know. I do see your second comment that often students do not want to disclose their disability status, but what if they did want to report an issue? I think that's still very much an option within this current system. Nowhere in the how to submit an accessibility ticket do we ask for someone's disability information. We don't need to know the student's name or disability status to understand what the user experience barrier is. We do need to know what assistive technology that person is using, where they are inside ctcLink, and what they were trying to complete so that we can investigate the issue. So I imagine in reality, most likely what's going to happen, and this might not be, what some of us at the state board envisioned, but since I was just in a disability services office, I imagine most likely in reality what's going to happen is students with disabilities who want to report an accessibility issue with ctcLink are most likely going to share their experience with the disability office first, if they're already connected with that office. In which case, we would ask that those staff forward that information to an authorized ticket submitter at your college to get that either in the SolarWinds ticketing system, if the ticket submitter can use that system, or using one of the emails that we provide so that our staff can review the ticket. And I know that's a few extra steps and perhaps not the most direct way to hear from students. So I want to acknowledge that, but I'm hoping that this information begins to answer your question, Megan.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Jonathan. I just want to say one more thing. The problem we have is we're not staffed to support taking tickets from students, nor can we really have a way to identify the student really is who the student is. And so that's why we have them use the local help desks, so the college can validate the student is who they are. We don't want to go around resetting accounts or passwords for people we can't validate. And, so that's why we push it back to the college's responsibilities to support the students for that.
So it may be that, this is Monica speaking, it may be that for those of you who are going to take this information and digest it with your colleagues back at your college, it may be that there needs to be some messaging put out to the students so that they understand who to contact when they have issues with ctcLink that they want to document or share. That might be helpful for them to understand what the process at their local college is to get that information heard and submitted to the state board. I would encourage folks who take this information back to their college campus for discussion to connect with their project managers about this. And I'm seeing a couple more comments in the chat. Chris said, sometimes we never hear back from them again after that. That's certainly a challenge when we get initial information from a student and then are unable to follow up with them for more information about their user experience. And we actually just experienced that with some information reported by someone else from a different college, from a student. And it was difficult for our team to replicate the issue because of all the various options happening on that page. So yes, that is a real problem. And Megan had a comment about tracking things, but thanks for the info. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to Chris's section. So I'll hand it over to you now, Chris. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christopher Soren. I'm the application support manager. So I'm going to talk about all the different pieces here are proactive, reactive, continuous. But I'll also describe. So one thing I learned at the AXCON conference. So I'm just describing me in the area I am. So I'm a mid-30s white male with short hair and a beard. My background, I have a little barrier with my kids' art on it. Next to me, you'll find a window and my wheelchair in my office chair here. So I've a great privilege of working with a great team. We approach fixing accessibility stuff in these three main ways. So the proactive piece is, so every time we go through new images, with whether it's like HCM, finance, campus solutions, they have they have like bug fixes and new features, and within those they have it's not always tagged very well. So anything that's tagged as an accessibility fix, we're going in and we're reviewing that to make sure it actually fixes what it says it fixes, and we're following up with Oracle if it's not. Or so, for example, we're going through a review right now of HCX version 22.1, reviewing all the accessibility fixes. And so we're looking ahead, and we're also attending these monthly meetings with Oracle, and Josh is gonna touch on that in the next slide. All the things that are coming, like in future people tools versions. And so we're proactively testing all these new bug fixes and accessibility fixes that are coming in, making sure that they're working as they should. We're including them in the implementations, and so that's a proactive piece. And anything that we might run across. So if we experience some sort of accessibility issue on the page, or we're reviewing code somewhere and we see that there's a missing ARIA label, we're going to open something up. So, based on the knowledge our staff have, and we can't interact with every single page in the entire system, but whatever we see, we report to. The reactive piece is we get a ticket in, we hear from somebody, something's wrong, and then we're going to go and review that. Is that a customized page? Can we, as a state board, just go ahead and start working on the development to get that fixed, or are we going to have to work with Oracle on that? Usually, we're going to have to work with Oracle on it. That's where that all those details, because they're going to ask us to replicate it, so we can show them here's what they were doing. They were using the JAWS screen reader and Chrome, and they were on this page, and you can see here the tab index is out of order. And so we're gonna show them, whether it's through screenshots or a video, or show them the code and how it needs to get fixed. So that's where all those details help. So that's the reactive piece. And then we're gonna keep on them to get that fix. Yeah, and the continuous piece is just we meet monthly also to talk about all of the open service requests we have with Oracle related just to accessibility, and so just continuing to keep pushing them to get those fixes to us as soon as we can. And so we're so if you see something, let us know. I'd love to press Oracle to fix it. And so I'll also talk about our development process. There's in the bottom half of the slide there. So we take that fix that we get from Oracle, or maybe it's a custom fix that we make, and we apply that to our development environment. And then we're going to, so let's say the issue was a tab index out of order. It was reported. So we're going to open up like Chrome or Firefox, fire up JAWS or NVDA, and then we're gonna scan through the page, interacting with it, making sure that tab index is where it should be. We're going to take a look at the code. Our main focus is making sure the code is compliant. So did Oracle introduce the right code to get us in line with the WCAG guidelines? And so we're gonna take a look at the code, and then we're gonna see if it did the thing. So for example, we recently got a fix from Oracle. We applied it to the test environment. It didn't fix it. So we said, hey, this didn't fix it. So they came back and they gave us a new fix, and it did fix it. So it resolved an issue, and that's on one of the slides later in finance. So and then we're going to get that. So once we've confirmed through our unit testing, our development environment, we're going to get into our test environment. So that's where the State Board functional teams are going to do some regression testing around that. So when we introduce this fix, did it break anything else? We need to make sure that everything still works as it should, and that it still fixed the accessibility issue in that environment. And then once we get into the quality assurance environment, that's where our testing team is going to work with the person that made the report. Hey, this was the problem. Hey, so they're going to schedule a time and date to meet with you and do some screen share. And then you can confirm that, hey, this actually did fix the thing that I reported. And then we're going to, if once it's confirmed it's all fixed and doesn't need any new redevelopment, or we don't need to go back to Oracle, then we're going to get it into our production environment where everybody's going to see the changes. So that's, we cycle through this development process for not just for accessibility fixes, but for all the development fixes and code fixes that we introduce. So that's our process. Is there any questions on this?
So, Christopher, I want to jump in here. This is Sandy at the State Board. As he was going through the proactive, reactive, and continuous items, there is a link on our slide deck that will take you to the end of the presentation, or the whole thing that goes into each one of these things into greater detail. It's hard to go through all of it right now, but I think you did cover everything in your conversation, but I wanted to let everybody know if on the slide deck at the end, all those details are available to you. And I also want to jump in on the section where we talk about the user acceptance testing with our end users. There are times where we are not able to get the end user to participate in validating that the fix addresses their issue that they reported. Sometimes it's obvious for us that it has fixed. So I would say this is on a case-by-case basis when we have to go back to the user, and that's true even outside of accessibility related issues that we fix. Sometimes it's an obvious thing and we can just go ahead and move it into production, and sometimes we do want that extra validation. So we'll take on those case by case. So Monica, do you want us to go ahead and go to the next section, because it's kind of with Josh?
Thanks, Sandy. This is Monica. Thanks, Chris, for that information. Does anyone have any questions or comments around this development cycle and information around testing processes that Chris explained? To reiterate, right now their team's main priority and focus is to evaluate for conformance and code compliance with WCAG standards. Okay, we're moving on to the next slide.
And I will introduce this slide. My name is Josh Jia. I'm a software developer here at the State Board. And one of the things we have I guess it's become a fortunate thing for us is over the past year, we've got to have meetings with Oracle, I guess, higher ups. There's a VP of software development in the HCM product for Oracle PeopleSoft that we've been having these monthly focus groups with them. And that's been going on for the past year or so now. And it includes all of PeopleSoft's HCM product customers. So PeopleSoft is a really big product. A lot of the customers are not just institutions, so they offer the HCM and finance products alone. So you have companies that are not necessarily in education using those products as well. So they're invited to the focus group. And what tends to be what happens at these focus groups is a ticket gets brought up by maybe or sent to Oracle through their service desk, and it will end up being something that affects the HCM or the product globally. And then they may have questions to see if their approach to fixing or addressing the problem is adequate, and they may bring that to the larger group. So an example of that, which is actually the first bullet point of this slide, is provide concurrent HTML and PDF W2 versions in addition to properly tagged PDF. So this issue revolves around the W2s and the HCM product, our HCM pillar. The W2s that were printed out via PDF were not tagged properly. And when we submitted the issue to Oracle as a ticket, there was pushback, and they said that product was controlled by a third-party company that's integrated into PeopleSoft, and they have no control over making sure that those PDFs are tagged properly. We said that that was unacceptable pretty much, and that was also the sentiment of the other customers that attended the focus group, which include like whole state agencies like Massachusetts, other institutions like Harvard or from Texas universities. So, and they actually, in Texas, if I remember correctly, brought to their attention through a ticket as well that the HTML version of the W2 wasn't adequate, and there were some issues there. So during the focus group, they brought both of these issues to everybody's attention and said that they actually had some solutions, which included they got in contact with that third-party company to get them to get us a tag version, and then they gave us some updates on when we will be seeing the changes to the HTML version of W2 to be addressed. So that's basically how the meetings go. Then they go into other items that we'll be seeing in either future HCM products or future people tools product, which is the kind of like the underpinning of all of PeopleSoft. So if something is something that is global, like as a button, that might be in the people tools area, and they'll tell us when we can expect to see that update come through, or what people tools version we can expect to see that update. So going down through this slide again, the second issue that they were lacking is skip to main content. So in most sites, you have the skip to main content button. As soon as you get to the page where you're able to skip straight to the main content of the page, so they'll be introducing that. Another issue that they brought to the group was prompt lookups in Fluid. Like the initial searches and the search results, it's not as robust as we'd see in standard products across the World Wide Web these days. When no rows are found, we expect the screen reader to announce that no rows are found, or to announce the amount of results that were found, and not be limited to 300 like we see in PeopleSoft. These are some of the topics that they brought to the group and asked us our opinions, and told us pretty much when we can expect to see or changes, and that's would be in the future People Tools release, which I believe they said was 8.6. And these bullet points will actually be in a larger, more specific, I'm calling it a one-pager, but it's actually probably going to be longer than that, because there's a lot of details from the focus group updates that we've had over the past year. So I'll be including that, and it'll be released on the ctcLink webpage along with this slide shortly. If we can move to the next page, this was kind of the past issues, and some of the future proposals that we're still having discussions on include display legends for all symbols utilized that are not expanded visually before the user encounters them. Examples would be the asterisk being used to indicate required fields. That seems like common sense, but it was something that had to get submitted as a ticket and discussed as a larger group. Read, next bullet point being read any important status message displayed as text to the user, so that does not to the user that does not receive focus. So if we get a success message, or that said that the action that you're performing on that page saved successfully, we expect that to be read to the screen reader, and currently does not. Incorporate invisible headers that can be found by assistive technology for instructions, important statuses, and other critical information displayed as text on the page. So this just goes back to making sure that you have well-formed content, and using your headers and your heading levels correctly. So just that kind of had to be a conversation over a couple forum groups. Is a lot of this stuff can be fixed pretty easily if we just follow the guidelines and use heading levels appropriately. Provide consistent and predictable initial focus across the self-service transactions. It's kind of across the board. Each team or each area in the self-service areas do things differently. So as soon as you get to a page, we want that they notice that it's kind of all over board where the initial focus is on the page. So they agreed that it should be on the when you're in a self-service area, there is a back button in the top left corner of the page, and that's universal across all the self-service areas. So they decided that will be the initial focus point, since it's consistent and predictable. The next bullet point on this page being include examples for text input where specific formats are required, such as date formats. These things seem very common sense, but I'm glad that they're going to be moving forward with those, and then making sure that the contrast ratio is appropriate with those, because a lot of times when you use placeholders and put the formats in the placeholders, the contrast ratio for that text is not usually up to standards. So they're going to make sure that the adjacent colors meet contrast ratio 4.5 to 1, 3 to 1. Another point being redesign the drop down box approach for input, which immediately triggers significant changes of content on the page without the user's knowledge. So in the, I think it's report time area, you can pick select a option and drop down, and it'll change the whole page without acknowledging the user. Especially if you use a screen reader, that we can see how that is a significant issue. So they've acknowledged that, and they're working on remediating that issue. So these are all good things that will improve usability for everyone, not just people that use assistive text. So we're glad to see them moving forward with these.
Thanks so much, Josh, for going into detail with us around these technical conversations with Oracle. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your last comment around how these improvements and fixes are going to provide a much better user experience for everyone, not just folks with disabilities who use AT. I'm thinking specifically about the example on the page that talks about when a specific format is required to enter in information such as dates, etc. I mean, I think many of us have had the experience, regardless of our disability status, where we're trying to fill out a form or something online, and we need to put in a phone number or an email address or a date in a very specific format, and we keep getting an error message, or we're told we cannot submit our form as completed, but it does not explain what we've done wrong or what the required format is. And although that is a technical accessibility requirement in WCAG guideline, it actually is a great example of universal design. So, and as are many of these, but so I really appreciate you going into more technical detail with everyone. For those of you on the call today, does anyone have any questions or comments for Josh and the work they're doing with Oracle? And part of that work is part of that technical work that they're doing with Oracle is really education advocacy and helping their team understand accessibility and the user experience in ways that they maybe don't, even though they should.
Yes, I couldn't agree with that more. And like I said, a more detailed version of the conversations and the bullet points from our monthly focus groups will be put on the website as a separate document from this slide deck. And that will be by the end of this week.
Right on. And I'll just take a moment to plug something that we talked about last month. Is Sandy and I now moderate an e-list called ctcLink Accessibility. Anyone can sign up to be on that e-list. And so when this information becomes available at the end of the week, I'll make sure to let everyone know that's on that e-list that it's available.
This is Christopher. Yeah, and it's been fun and interesting to see how our issues that we've reported through the service requests have bubbled up into these national conversations that they're presenting monthly. So our insistence and in conversation with them as we all learn and collectively get the system more accessible and improved for everybody. It's been fun to see. So this is the last one. So the fix for the incorrect PDF tags on the academic advisor report has shifted from CS English 25 to English 26. And then with the finance travel authorizations, we finally got a PRP that worked. This is a little bit of that back and forth where we test their fixes to see if it did the thing, and it didn't. So we let them know, and then they came back and give us another one that fixed it. It looks like so. We've done our initial testing on it, and we'll implement it post DG6. And so this will be another focus here where we're just kind of showing what's changed since last month. We have at the end of the slide deck, we have all the list of the currently open things that we're continuing to work through with them, but we'll be focusing here at the end on what's changed. So that's what shifted from last month.
Monica, this is Sandy. I think that's the end of what we had scheduled to present on.
Yes, you are correct, Sandy. This is Monica, and we are at time. That went by super fast. So thanks all for being here. We've reached the end of our conversation. Again, more information is going to be available at the end of this week. We'll put information, yep, I'll mention that in a minute. We'll put information about submitting accessibility tickets on our webpage. And then the other thing I want to mention is I have received personally some feedback from colleagues at various colleges that, you know, we use a lot of different terminology in these conversations or acronyms that can be confusing if you're not using them every day. So we are currently working on a glossary of terms that we will share with everyone to help make sure we remain on the same page. So for example, what is an IOVD and why should you care about it? So that'll be coming soon. We're working on that. And Sandy, what's the date of our next meeting in May? I'm sorry, I don't have that right in front of me.
I had it. I think it is May 10th. I probably have it on the next slide.
Wow, oh, there we go. Cool. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so we'll see everyone for our next meeting, May 10th at 11 o'clock. And we'll go ahead and end the recording now and say goodbye.